At a seemingly perfect Christmas dinner, a young pregnant woman is blindsided by a humiliation no one could have imagined, right in front of the entire family. Amidst twinkling lights and fake smiles, a forced divorce is shoved upon her like an unavoidable sentence, shattering her hopes and dreams. But just as the mansion doors swing open, an unexpected guest arrives, revealing secrets that are about to turn the entire night on its head. In a matter of moments, the woman who seemed so helpless becomes the center of a plot twist that none of the guests could have ever seen coming. Before we dive into this story of power, revenge, and unexpected justice, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more shocking tales. The clinking of silver cutlery against fine china was the only melody breaking the tense silence in the Sterling's lavish dining room. Twinkling lights from a towering Christmas tree reflected in Sophia's tear-filled eyes as she felt the weight of every gaze upon her. The aroma of roasted turkey and cornbread stuffing, which should have felt comforting, now seemed to suffocate her. 6 months pregnant, she tried in vain to maintain her composure, her trembling hands resting on her prominent belly. At the head of the table, Beatrice Sterling, the matriarch with a glacial expression and gleaming jewels, smiled with calculated cruelty. Her eyes, once fixed on Sophia, swept across the table, ensuring that everyone present, aunts, uncles, cousins, hangers-on, was a witness to the humiliation she was about to orchestrate. "My dear Sophia," Beatrice began, her voice as soft as velvet but as sharp as a blade, "we've always known you were delicate, fragile, I'd say, and, let's be honest, a bit too emotionally unstable for our family's standards." Sophia felt a lump form in her throat. Her mother-in-law's words were like daggers, each one aimed at the little dignity she had left. She tried to breathe deeply, remembering the tiny being growing inside her, the reason for her strength. But the pressure was immense. "Raising a child, Sophia," Beatrice continued, giving no quarter, "requires more than good intentions. It demands structure, stability, an unshakable temperament, qualities that, unfortunately, you do not possess." With a theatrical gesture, the matriarch pushed a document across the polished mahogany table, right between the floral arrangements and crystal glasses. It was a divorce agreement. "Sign it, dear, it's what's best for the baby," she said, her voice now tinged with false compassion. Beside Beatrice, Peter, Sophia's husband, and the matriarch's son remained silent. His eyes, once full of promises, now darted away, fixed on some random point on the wall. When he finally spoke, his voice was a rehearsed whisper, devoid of any emotion. "Sophia, it's for the best. For the baby. For all of us." Murmurs spread across the table. "She's far too sensitive," an aunt whispered. "She never really fit in," another added. Sophia felt completely alone, the isolation suffocating. The tears she had tried so hard to hold back finally streamed down, hot and bitter. With blurred vision, she took the pen Beatrice offered her and, between sobs, signed the Christmas Eve divorce. She believed she was losing everything, but as she stood up, something shifted. The profound pain gave way to a spark of defiance. She faced Beatrice, her eyes red but firm. "I am not disposable," Sophia said, her voice choked but surprisingly clear, "and I will protect my child. Surviving tonight is proof of strength enough." A deathly silence fell over the room. No one expected that reaction from a woman who seemed completely broken. It was in that silence that a loud creak echoed from the massive doors of the mansion. Firm footsteps resonated across the marble floor, interrupting the matriarch's tyranny. A tall, imposing man covered in snowflakes appeared in the doorway. No one in the Sterling family recognized him, but Sophia did. It was her father. The discreet man her husband's family never knew existed. The influential billionaire, owner of secret shares in companies the Sterlings thought they controlled. The snow melted on the man's broad shoulders, forming small puddles on the Persian rug. His piercing blue eyes swept the room, landing on his daughter in tears. The sight of Sophia, pale and visibly shaken, clutching her belly, made Arthur's usual reserve vanish like smoke. This wasn't the cold, calculating businessman who negotiated billion-dollar deals in boardrooms. This was a father watching his daughter be torn apart. Beatrice, who until then had maintained a haughty posture, turned pale. The presence of this stranger, with his unquestionable aura of power, unsettled her. "Who is this man?" she hissed at Peter, who just shrugged, as surprised as everyone else. Arthur ignored the matriarch's question. His steady steps took him to Sophia. With a gentle gesture, he supported her, feeling the tremor in her arms. "My daughter," he said, his voice deep but filled with a tenderness Sophia hadn't heard in years. "Why didn't you call me?" Sophia couldn't answer, just nestled into her father's protective embrace. That touch, that familiar scent, was the balm her wounded soul desperately needed. Arthur then turned to the table, his blue eyes flashing. "Manipulation, veiled threats, psychological abuse," he stated, his voice now cold and sharp, echoing through the room. "Is this how the Sterling family treats a pregnant woman? Is this how you welcome the mother of your grandchild?" The accusation hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. Peter tried to stammer something, but the words died in his throat. Beatrice, for her part, tried to regain her composure. "Sir, I don't know who you are, but you are meddling in family matters that are none of your concern." Arthur let out a bitter laugh. "None of my concern? This is my daughter, Beatrice, and the baby she's carrying is my grandchild. That gives me every right to be here and to demand an explanation." He signaled to a man accompanying him, who discreetly handed him a leather portfolio. "Since we're talking about family matters and rights, perhaps you'll be interested in these documents." With a precise movement, Arthur spread papers across the table, right next to the divorce agreement Sophia had signed. They were bank statements, audit reports, contracts with obscure clauses. "Financial irregularities, illegal maneuvers, embezzlement," Arthur listed, each word a direct hit. "It seems the Sterling Empire isn't as solid as you like to pretend, and funnily enough, some of these irregularities involve companies in which I, by chance, hold significant shares." The shock was palpable. The color drained from Beatrice's face. Peter, who had been hiding behind his silence, finally understood the gravity of the situation. His cowardice, his inaction, would have far greater consequences than he had ever imagined. Several relatives exchanged nervous glances as panic began to set in. The fall of the family, so arrogant just minutes before, seemed imminent. Arthur, with Sophia still supported by his side, gave them no time to recover. "My daughter and my grandchild are coming with me. Custody will not be contested, and any attempt at harassment, any threat, will result in public exposure, lawsuits that will make this Christmas dinner look like a picnic, and the permanent loss of everything you've built." The entire family, once so arrogant, cowered before the naked truth. Sophia, once fragile and alone, now left supported by her father, breathing air that wasn't heavy for the first time. Outside, the snow fell gently, and she realized she hadn't lost anything by signing the divorce. She had freed herself from an environment that never welcomed her. With her hand on her belly, she felt the baby move in a different, calmer way, as if it also knew they were safe. She silently promised that she would give her child a life based on love and respect, far from the cruelty she had witnessed. And as the warm light of her father's car lit, the way she understood that the title of that night, "In tears she signs the divorce at Christmas dinner, they never knew her father was a billionaire," didn't mark her end, but the beginning of a new story, written by her own hands. What did you think of this twist in the story? The luxury SUV glided smoothly through the snow-covered streets, leaving the Sterling mansion and the nightmare of that Christmas Eve behind. Sophia, nestled in the heated leather seat, felt the comforting warmth of her father's hand on hers. The crying had stopped, replaced by a mixture of relief and deep exhaustion. The baby in her womb, once restless, now seemed to be sleeping peacefully, as if its mother's tension had finally dissipated. Arthur, at the wheel, kept his eyes on the road, but his attention was entirely on his daughter. He felt the need to make up for years of absence, of silence, of a discretion that at that moment seemed like a colossal mistake. "Are you okay, sweetheart?" he asked, his voice soft, breaking the comfortable silence in the car. Sophia nodded, a sigh escaping her lips. "I am now, Dad. I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't shown up." The gratitude in her voice was palpable. "I didn't know you, that you were like this." Arthur managed a small, melancholic smile. "I've always been like this, Sophia. I just chose to keep a low profile. My professional life has always demanded discretion, and I thought I was protecting you by keeping you away from all of this." He paused, his eyes fixed on the passing city lights. "But I realize now that my discretion left you vulnerable, and that's a mistake I won't make again." The conversation flowed, a river of years, of silence finally breaking its dam. Sophia told him about the months of veiled humiliation, the small daily cruelties, the feeling of never being good enough by the Sterling's standards. She spoke of the love she felt for Peter, a love that had turned to ash in the face of his cowardice. Arthur listened intently, each of his daughter's words fanning a flame of indignation in his chest. "They never knew about you, Dad," Sophia said, her voice almost a whisper. "I always said my father was a simple man, a retired professor. They never bothered to look into it, to ask more questions. To them I was just a girl with no pedigree, an intruder." Arthur squeezed her hand. "They made a fatal mistake by underestimating you, my daughter, and by underestimating who you belong to." He drove to an imposing mansion in a wooded neighborhood, very different from the cold ostentation of the Sterlings. It was a house that exuded warmth, with soft lights and a well-tended garden, even under the snow. As they entered, Sophia was greeted by a woman with a welcoming smile, Arthur's housekeeper, who hugged her warmly. "Welcome, dear. Your father called me. Everything is ready for you." In the room prepared for her, Sophia found a sanctuary, a soft bed, a spacious bathroom, and a view of the snow-covered garden. For the first time in a long time, she felt safe, protected. This wasn't the end, but the beginning. The divorce signed on Christmas Eve wasn't a defeat, but a liberation. As she prepared for sleep, her hand on her belly, Sophia felt the baby move again, a gentle, reassuring kick. She smiled. This little being was her strength, her promise of a different future. A future where love and respect would be the pillars, not cruelty and manipulation. She fell asleep with the certainty that, from that moment on, her story would be written by her own hands, with the help and unconditional love of her father. Do you think Sophia will be able to fully recover after this traumatic experience? The days following Christmas were a balm for Sophia's wounded soul. Her father Arthur's mansion became a sanctuary of peace and acceptance. Away from the judgmental stares and oppressive atmosphere of the Sterlings, she could finally breathe. The housekeeper, Mrs. Miller, a middle-aged woman with a heart of gold, cared for her with motherly affection, preparing calming teas and nutritious meals. Arthur, for his part, devoted himself to Sophia with an intensity she had never experienced. He cancelled meetings, postponed trips, and spent hours talking with his daughter, listening to her fears and hopes. The relationship between father and daughter, once marked by a respectful distance, blossomed into a deep and healing intimacy. He encouraged her to talk, to express everything she felt, and with every word, Sophia felt a weight lift from her shoulders. "You don't have to worry about a thing now, sweetheart," Arthur would repeat. "Your only job is to take care of yourself and my grandchild. Leave the rest to me." And he kept his promise. Attorneys were hired, and the divorce proceedings, which Beatrice had imagined would be a simple formality, turned into a legal nightmare for the Sterlings. Arthur wasn't seeking revenge, but justice. He wanted to ensure that Sophia and the baby had everything they were entitled to, and that Peter's family paid for the humiliation they had inflicted. Meanwhile, chaos reigned at the Sterling mansion. Arthur's exposure of their financial irregularities had triggered a series of investigations. Their company's stock plummeted, and the family name, once synonymous with power and respectability, was now being dragged through the mud on the news. Beatrice, once unshakable, was on the verge of a nervous breakdown. Peter, cornered and unsure how to react, watched his world crumble. He tried to contact Sophia, sending messages and calling incessantly, but she didn't answer. Her father's words echoed in her mind. Any attempt at harassment will result in public exposure, lawsuits, and the permanent loss of everything. Peter knew Arthur wasn't bluffing. Sophia, for her part, felt a strange mix of emotions. There was no joy in their misfortune, but there was a sense of justice. She didn't wish Peter ill, but his cowardice had wounded her deeply. The love that once seemed so strong had proven to be fragile and conditional. As the weeks went by, Sophia began to feel stronger, both physically and emotionally. The morning sickness subsided and her belly grew, housing a life that became more real each day. She spent hours in the baby's room, decorating, choosing tiny outfits, imagining her child's face. Arthur, watching her, felt immense pride. His daughter, once so fragile, was transforming into a resilient and determined woman. One day, while looking through an old photo album with her father, Sophia found a picture of her mother, a beautiful woman with a sweet smile and kind eyes who looked a lot like her. "She was an incredible woman, Sophia," Arthur said, his voice thick with emotion. "Strong, intelligent, and with a huge heart. You're so much like her." The conversation about her mother brought up memories Sophia had kept locked away. She remembered small details, gestures of affection, stories told before bedtime. That moment of sharing with her father filled a void she didn't even know she had. Time flew by, and the due date approached. Sophia was anxious but no longer afraid. She had the unconditional support of her father, the love of her baby, and the certainty that she was building a better future. That Christmas, which should have been the end, had become the true beginning of her story. How do you think the baby's arrival will impact Sophia's life and her relationship with her father? The arrival of Lucas, a boy with curious eyes and a strong cry, transformed Sophia and Arthur's lives in ways they could never have imagined. The delivery was long and exhausting, but the pain vanished the instant Sophia held her son in her arms. In that moment, the outside world, with its heartaches and humiliations, ceased to exist. There was only her and Lucas, an unbreakable bond. Arthur, who had been there through the entire process, watched the scene with teary eyes. Seeing Sophia become a mother so strong and devoted filled his heart with immense pride. He, the reserved billionaire, discovered a grandfatherly tenderness and love within himself that surprised him. Lucas was living proof that even in the greatest adversity, life finds a way to flourish. The mansion, once quiet and formal, was filled with new life with the baby's presence. The cries, the giggles, the little noises Lucas made filled every room. Arthur, who used to spend most of his time in his office, now found himself watching his grandson sleep in his crib, or gently rocking him in his arms. Mrs. Miller, for her part, was enchanted with the new family member, spoiling Lucas with a grandmother's affection. Sophia dove headfirst into motherhood, the sleepless nights, the diaper changes, the endless feedings. It was all new and challenging, but also incredibly rewarding. She discovered an inner strength she didn't know she possessed, a resilience that helped her overcome every obstacle. Her love for Lucas was a shield against any painful memories of the past. While Sophia dedicated herself to her son, Arthur continued to manage the fallout from the Christmas Eve divorce. The investigations into the Sterling's irregularities were moving forward, and Peter's family was increasingly cornered. News of the scandal was all over the papers, and the empire Beatrice was so proud of was in ruins. Peter, desperate, tried again to get close to Sophia. He called, sent messages, begged to see his son. But Sophia, protected by her father and the new strength motherhood had given her, stood firm. She knew Peter hadn't changed, that his cowardice was still the same. And more importantly, she knew Lucas deserved a father who would love him unconditionally, not a man who cowered before his own mother. "Doesn't he have a right to see Lucas, Dad?" Sophia asked Arthur one day, her voice filled with doubt. Arthur looked at her seriously. "Legally he does, but morally, Sophia, he lost that right the moment he humiliated and abandoned you. And I will make sure he doesn't come near you two without a formal agreement that guarantees your safety and Lucas's." Sophia's life was being rebuilt, brick by brick. She began to think about her future, about her own dreams and aspirations. With Arthur's support, she enrolled in online courses, seeking to improve her knowledge and skills. She wanted to be an example for Lucas, to show him that a woman can be a mother, a professional, and independent. A year had passed since that fateful Christmas Eve. Lucas was starting to walk, his clumsy first steps filling the house with joy. Sophia, more mature and confident, felt like a new woman. The scar from the past still existed, but it no longer defined her. She had transformed pain into strength, humiliation into resilience. On a sunny day, while watching Lucas play in the garden, Sophia realized that life, despite its twists and turns, was a precious gift. She had a beautiful son, a loving father, and a promising future. The Christmas Eve divorce had indeed been the beginning of her true story. Do you think Peter will still play a significant role in Sophia and Lucas's lives? Sophia's question about Peter's role in Lucas's life hung in the air, an uncomfortable reminder of a past she was trying to leave behind. Arthur, with his wisdom and experience, knew the issue wasn't if Peter would try to reconnect, but when and how. And he was prepared to protect his daughter and grandson at all costs. The months turned into years. Lucas grew into a smart, lively boy with his grandfather's blue eyes and his mother's captivating smile. Sophia flourished alongside her son, dedicating herself to her studies and a new project she was passionate about, a social initiative aimed at single mothers in vulnerable situations. The idea stemmed from her own experience, from the loneliness and helplessness she felt before her father's intervention. Arthur, seeing his daughter's passion, didn't hesitate to support the project, offering resources and his vast network of contacts. Sophia, with her determination and empathy, turned the initiative into a success, helping hundreds of women find support, training, and a new purpose. She became a respected voice, an inspiration to many. While Sophia and Lucas's lives prospered, the Sterling Empire continued its downfall. The investigations revealed a complex scheme of corruption and money laundering, involving not only Beatrice and Peter, but other family members as well. Their assets were frozen, accounts seized, and the once powerful matriarch faced legal proceedings that threatened to send her to prison. Peter, stripped of his fortune and status, tried to rebuild his life, but the shadow of the scandal followed him. He found himself alone, abandoned by the friends and family who once fawned over him. The cowardice that had stopped him from defending Sophia now haunted him, a silent and relentless punishment. One day, Sophia received an unexpected call. It was Peter. His voice was different without its former arrogance, filled with a desperation she never imagined hearing. He begged to see. Lucas pleaded for a chance to redeem himself. Sophia hesitated. The hurt was still there, but the anger had subsided, replaced by a strange compassion. She consulted Arthur, who advised her to be cautious. He's Lucas's biological father, Sophia. But the right to be a father is earned through actions, not blood ties. After much reflection, Sophia decided to give Peter a chance, but on her own terms. The meeting would be in a public place, with Arthur and a child psychologist present. She wanted to protect Lucas from any trauma, any disappointment. The reunion was tense. Peter, visibly worn down, tried to apologize, but his words sounded hollow in the presence of the vibrant Lucas, who played happily, oblivious to the complexity of the situation. Sophia watched, attentive to every interaction. She realized Peter was no longer the man she had loved, nor the monster who had humiliated her. He was just a broken man trying to pick himself up. Lucas, with his childlike innocence, didn't sense the tension. He walked up to Peter and offered him one of his toys. Peter, surprised, took the little car, and for a brief moment a genuine smile lit up his face. Sophia knew the road ahead would be long and uncertain. The wound was still open, but the hope of a possible reconciliation, not as a couple but as parents, was beginning to emerge. She didn't know what the future held, but she was certain that with Lucas by her side and the unconditional support of her father, she could face any challenge. Do you think Peter will truly be able to redeem himself and build a healthy relationship with Lucas? Sophia's question about Peter's redemption echoed in her mind, an unknown that would follow her for years to come. The first meeting, though tense, had been a step. Peter, visibly shaken, didn't push his luck, respecting the boundaries set by Sophia and the imposing presence of Arthur. The child psychologist, Dr. Helen Wallace, observed the interaction professionally, noting every detail. In the following months, the meetings between Peter and Lucas became more frequent, always under the discreet supervision of Sophia and, at times, Arthur. Peter, stripped of his old arrogance, proved to be a dedicated, if still somewhat clumsy, father. He read stories to Lucas, played with him at the park, and tried, in his own way, to build a bridge with the son he barely knew. Sophia watched Peter's transformation with a mix of skepticism and a glimmer of hope. He was no longer the cowardly man who had abandoned her. The fall of his family, the loss of everything he had known, seemed to have forced him to face reality and mature. He worked a modest job, far from the limelight, and seemed genuinely sorry for his past actions. Dr. Wallace, in her sessions with Sophia, Peter, and Lucas, stressed the importance of consistency and honesty. Lucas needs a father who is present, Sophia, but he also needs parents who respect each other even if they're no longer together. Anger and resentment will only harm the child. Sophia, with the help of therapy, began to process her own wounds. She realized that to move forward, she needed to forgive, not for Peter's sake, but for her own. Forgiveness didn't mean forgetting or rekindling the relationship, but freeing herself from the weight of the past. Meanwhile, Arthur's life was also changing. He had become a devoted grandfather, and the presence of Lucas and Sophia in his life brought a joy and purpose he hadn't felt in a long time. His company, once the center of his universe, now shared space with trips to the park and bedtime stories. Sophia's social initiative, the Beacon Project, was thriving. She had become a respected public figure, an active voice in advocating for the rights of women and children. Her work filled her with a purpose that went beyond her own story, transforming her pain into a driving force to help others. One day, Peter approached Sophia for a serious conversation. He had found a better, though still modest, job and wanted to contribute financially to Lucas's upbringing. More than that, he wanted to truly apologize for everything he had done. "I know I can't erase the past, Sophia," he said, his eyes welling up, "but I want to be a father to Lucas, a real father. And I want you to know that I deeply regret hurting you. I was a coward, and there's no excuse for it." Sophia listened to him intently. Peter's words sounded sincere. She saw in him not the man who had humiliated her, but a father who was fighting to redeem himself. "I don't know if I can ever completely forgive you, Peter," she said, her voice soft but firm. "But I see the effort you're making for Lucas, and that to me is what matters most." She set new conditions for Peter's time with Lucas, more flexible but still with clear boundaries. Peter accepted all of them, grateful for the opportunity. The relationship between Sophia and Peter would never be the same, but a new dynamic was beginning to form, based on mutual respect and their love for Lucas. The wound was still there, but it was healing, and life, with its complexities and twists, continued to surprise them. Do you think the Sterling family, especially Beatrice, will still try to interfere in Sophia and Lucas's lives? The question of interference from the Sterling family was a valid one, because even with the collapse of their empire, the shadow of Beatrice still loomed. The matriarch, now under house arrest due to her advanced age and health problems, watched from afar as Sophia rose and Peter rebuilt his life, a mixture of fury and impotence churning within her. Her wounded pride wouldn't allow her to accept the new reality. Beatrice, despite her limitations, still had a network of contacts and a cunning mind. She tried on several occasions to use the press to slander Sophia, spreading rumors about her personal and professional life. However, Sophia's impeccable reputation, built through her work with the Beacon Project and the unconditional support of Arthur, was an impenetrable shield. Beatrice's attempts only exposed her to further public ridicule. Arthur, ever vigilant, monitored every move of his daughter's former mother-in-law. His lawyers were ready to act at any sign of a direct threat to Sophia or Lucas. He knew that the old lioness, even wounded, could still lash out. Peter, for his part, had cut ties with his family. The shame and disappointment were too great. He refused to visit his mother and ignored calls from the few relatives who still tried to stay in touch. His priority was Lucas and rebuilding his own life, far from the toxicity of the Sterlings. Lucas, now 5 years old, was a happy and well-adjusted child. He had a healthy relationship with Peter, who made every effort to be a present and loving father. The visits were regular, and Peter showed genuine affection for his son. Sophia, watching the two of them interact, felt a sense of relief. Lucas had a father, and that was what mattered most. The relationship between Sophia and Peter, though cordial, maintained a respectful distance. They were Lucas's parents, and nothing more. There were no lingering romantic feelings, only a partnership focused on their son's well-being. Sophia had found peace in her new life, and Peter redemption in his fatherhood. One day news broke that shook everyone. Beatrice Sterling had passed away. The matriarch, who once reigned supreme, departed quietly, without the glamour and pomp she had always craved. The news was met with mixed feelings. For Sophia, it was the end of a cycle, the closing of a painful chapter. For Peter, it was the end of an era, freedom from an oppressive influence. The funeral was discreet, with few attendees. Peter was there but kept his distance, watching from afar. He didn't feel grief, but a strange sense of emptiness. The woman who had shaped him, who had taught him to be ambitious and at the same time cowardly, was gone. Sophia did not attend the funeral. She chose to spend the day with Lucas, playing at the park, celebrating life. She knew that Beatrice's death didn't erase the past, but it opened a new path free from any shadow or threat. With the matriarch's passing, the Sterling family completely disintegrated. The few remaining assets were fought over in legal battles, and the family name faded into obscurity, becoming just a footnote in the history of high society. Sophia, on the other hand, continued to shine. The Beacon Project expanded its operations, becoming a national benchmark. She was invited to give lectures and attend conferences, becoming an influential voice in the fight for a more just and equal world. Life, with its twists and turns, had taught her that true strength wasn't in wealth or power, but in resilience, love, and the ability to rise after a fall. Do you think Sophia, with her growing influence, might become a target for new adversities, even without Beatrice's presence? Sophia's rise as an influential public figure, while gratifying, brought with it a new set of challenges. The question of new adversities was pertinent, as success, much like vulnerability, attracts attention, some admiring, others envious. Arthur, with his vast experience in the worlds of business and politics, was aware of these dangers and increased the security for his daughter and grandson. Power is a double-edged sword, Sophia, he would warn her. The higher you fly, the more visible you become, and not everyone will applaud your success. Sophia, however, refused to be intimidated. Her passion for the Beacon Project and her desire to make a difference were greater than any fear. She learned to navigate the complex world of media and politics, always with her father's guidance and the strength she found in Lucas. Lucas, now 7, was a smart and curious boy. He was immensely proud of his mother, whom he saw on television and in the newspapers, and he admired his grandfather's dedication. The figure of Peter, his biological father, was present, but in a different way. He was the weekend dad, the man who took him on outings and played with him, but the primary father figure in his life was Arthur. Sophia's relationship with Peter had stabilized into a respectful friendship. They shared the responsibility of raising Lucas, and Peter, with his newfound humility, was a devoted father. He had found a new purpose in his life, working for an environmental non-profit, and seemed genuinely happy. Despite the apparent peace, a new shadow began to emerge on the horizon. It wasn't a direct threat, but a series of small incidents that, when added up, formed a disturbing pattern. Anonymous articles on gossip blogs questioning the integrity of the Beacon Project and the source of its funding. Minor acts of sabotage at the non-profit's events, like unexpected technical problems or last-minute cancellations. At first, Sophia tried to ignore it, but Arthur, with his keen sense for intrigue, realized something was wrong. This isn't random, Sophia. Someone is trying to destabilize you. Arthur's discreet investigation revealed that the source of the attacks was a group of businessmen in the charity sector who felt threatened by the rapid growth and popularity of the Beacon Project. They saw Sophia as a competitor, a newcomer who was stealing their piece of the pie. Among these businessmen, one name stood out: Dr. August Valentine, a powerful and influential man known for his ostentatious philanthropy and his ability to manipulate public opinion. Valentine, who had once dominated the non-profit scene, saw Sophia as a threat to his charity empire. Sophia, upon discovering the identity of her new adversary, felt a chill. Valentine was a respected name, with connections at every level of society. Facing him would be an uphill battle. Arthur, however, was more than ready for the challenge. "Don't worry, my daughter. We're going to expose this man. The truth always finds a way." The battle that loomed would not be one of shouting and humiliation, like at the Christmas dinner, but one of strategy, information, and the fight for the truth. Sophia, with her acquired experience and the unconditional support of her father, was ready to defend her legacy and the cause she loved so dearly. She knew that life was a succession of challenges, and that each one made her stronger. The fragile young woman who had signed a divorce in tears had transformed into a powerful woman, capable of facing any adversity. Do you think Sophia and Arthur will succeed in unmasking Dr. Valentine and protecting the Beacon Project from his attacks? The battle against Dr. August Valentine promised to be a complex chess match, where every move had to be calculated with precision. Arthur, with his strategic mind, devised a plan. He knew that Valentine's strength lay in his impeccable public image and his network of contacts. To unmask him, they would need more than mere accusations. They would need irrefutable proof. Sophia, for her part, focused on strengthening the Beacon Project from within. She reviewed all their processes, ensured the transparency of their finances, and intensified communication with the mothers they served, turning them into allies. The best defense, she knew, was the integrity of her work. The first phase of Arthur's plan involved a thorough investigation into Valentine's operations. His discreet and efficient private investigators began to dig into the philanthropist's past, looking for any cracks in his benevolent facade. It wasn't long before the first irregularities began to surface. They discovered that Valentine was using his non-profits as a front to embezzle funds, launder money, and manipulate donations for his own benefit. He also pressured smaller organizations, forcing them to merge with his institutions or shut down, thereby eliminating the competition. As the investigation progressed, Valentine intensified his attacks on Sophia. He planted fake news stories in smaller media outlets, insinuating that the Beacon Project was a fraud and that Sophia was using the cause for personal enrichment. The pressure on Sophia was immense, but she stood firm, remembering her father's words. Lucas, now older, sensed the tension in the air. He saw his mother was busier and his grandfather more serious. Sophia, with a mother's wisdom, explained to him that they were fighting for a just cause and that people weren't always what they seemed. One day Arthur called a meeting with Sophia and his lawyers. The portfolio he brought contained damning evidence against Valentine: bank statements, compromising emails, testimonies from former employees, and even recordings of conversations where he orchestrated his schemes. "We have enough to take him down, Sophia," Arthur said, his voice firm. "But we need to be strategic. If we attack him directly, he'll use his influence to discredit us. We need a checkmate." The checkmate came in the form of a press conference, carefully orchestrated by Arthur. Instead of attacking Valentine directly, Sophia presented a detailed report on the importance of transparency and ethics in the non-profit sector, using the Beacon Project as an example of best practices. Then Arthur, with his flawless reputation, gave a speech on the need for oversight and accountability, implying that not all non-profits operated with the same integrity. The media, intrigued, began to read between the lines. It was then that Arthur discreetly leaked the evidence to trusted investigative journalists. The bombshell exploded. The headlines blared Valentine's scandals, revealing his true face. The charity empire he had built crumbled in a matter of days. Valentine tried to defend himself, but the evidence was irrefutable. He was sued, lost his reputation, and saw his name dragged through the mud. His fall was as spectacular as his rise. Sophia, seeing justice served, felt a profound sense of relief. It wasn't a personal victory, but a victory for the cause she championed. The Beacon Project emerged from the episode stronger, its credibility and reputation even more solidified. Life, once again, had shown her that integrity and truth always prevail, even against the most powerful adversaries. Do you think this victory will bring a lasting period of peace for Sophia, or will new challenges arise on her path? The victory over Valentine brought a period of relative calm for Sophia, but lasting peace was a mirage she had already learned not to chase. Life, in its essence, was a constant flow of challenges and lessons. The experience with Valentine, however, had strengthened her even more, solidifying her position as a respected leader and an influential voice on the social stage. The Beacon Project thrived, expanding its operations to other cities and becoming a model of management and social impact. Sophia, with her vision and dedication, transformed the non-profit into a platform of empowerment for thousands of women, offering not just material support, but also professional training and psychological counseling. Lucas, now 10, was a vibrant boy with a sharp intellect and a kind heart. He admired his mother and grandfather, and the presence of Peter in his life, though more distant, was a constant. Peter had moved to the countryside, dedicating himself fully to the environmental non-profit, and his visits with Lucas became less frequent but always meaningful. Arthur, watching his daughter and grandson, felt a deep satisfaction. He had fulfilled his promise to protect Sophia and give her the tools to build her own path. Now he began to think about his own legacy, about how he could use his fortune and influence for greater causes beyond just protecting his family. However, Sophia's tranquility would be tested again, but in an unexpected way. It wouldn't come from an external enemy, but from within her own organization. A new employee, recently hired for a leadership position at the Beacon Project, began to exhibit strange behavior. Marianne, a charismatic and seemingly dedicated woman, quickly won the team's trust. She was efficient, proactive, and appeared to share Sophia's ideals. However, small details started to catch Sophia's attention. Marianne was overly curious about the non-profit's finances, asked unusual questions about donors, and seemed to have a particular interest in expansion projects. Sophia, with her sharp intuition, felt uneasy. She had learned to trust her instincts, and something about Marianne didn't feel right. She began to observe the new employee more closely, discreetly, without raising suspicion. Gradually, Sophia started to notice inconsistencies, financial reports with minor discrepancies, information about projects still in the planning phase being leaked to the press, and a growing dissatisfaction among some of the mothers being helped, who complained of excessive bureaucracy and a lack of attention. Sophia shared her concerns with Arthur. He, with his experience in dealing with betrayals and corporate intrigue, advised her to act cautiously. Don't confront her yet, Sophia. Gather evidence. People like her are masters at manipulating the truth. With Arthur's help, Sophia installed a discreet monitoring system on the non-profit's computers and began to review all of Marianne's documents and emails. The truth, as always, soon came to light. Marianne was embezzling funds from the non-profit, creating shell companies to receive donations, and sabotaging projects to benefit competing organizations that were paying her on the side. She was a spy, infiltrated by a group of unscrupulous businessmen who wanted to destabilize the Beacon Project and steal its successful methodology. The revelation was a blow to Sophia. She had trusted Marianne, had welcomed her to her team. The betrayal hurt more than any external attack, but the pain quickly turned into determination. Sophia confronted Marianne with the irrefutable evidence. The woman, cornered, confessed everything. She was fired and reported to the authorities, and the scandal was contained to protect the image of the Beacon Project. The experience, though painful, served as a reminder to Sophia that constant vigilance was essential, even within her own house. She learned that not everyone who smiles is a friend, and that trust, once broken, is difficult to restore. Do you think Sophia will become more skeptical and distrustful after this betrayal, or will she maintain her essence of believing in people? Marianne's betrayal left a scar on Sophia, a wound that, though not visible, altered her perception of the world. The question of her skepticism was pertinent, as the experience forced her to re-evaluate the fine line between trust and naivety. She didn't become bitter, but she did acquire a layer of prudence, a more discerning eye for the subtext of human relationships. The Beacon Project emerged stronger from the episode, with its security and transparency protocols enhanced. Sophia implemented a rigorous internal audit system and invested in training for her team, reinforcing the importance of ethics and loyalty. She knew the nonprofit's integrity was its greatest asset. Lucas, now 11, was a perceptive observer. He noticed his mother's sadness, but he also saw her rise again with renewed strength. Sophia's resilience was a living lesson for her son, who learned from her the importance of facing adversity head-on. Arthur, seeing his daughter's maturity, felt immense pride. He knew Sophia had moved beyond being just his protégée. She had become a leader in her own right, capable of navigating the complexities of the world with wisdom and determination. Sophia's life, however, wasn't just about professional challenges and victories. There was a void in her personal life, a space that her love and dedication to Lucas and the non-profit didn't completely fill. She missed having a partner, someone to share the small moments of life with, the joys and the sorrows. Her friends and colleagues tried to introduce her to interesting men, but Sophia was cautious. Past experiences had taught her to be selective, not to give her heart away easily. She was looking for a genuine connection, a partner who would see her as Sophia, the woman, not as Sophia, the founder of the Beacon Project, or the daughter of the billionaire Arthur. It was at a charity event, organized by her own non-profit, that Sophia met Daniel. He was a renowned architect with an easy smile and eyes that conveyed an unusual calm. Daniel didn't know her as a public figure. He met her as the woman who spoke with passion about her work, who laughed with a light heart, and who had a special sparkle in her eyes. The conversation flowed naturally. They discovered common interests, a passion for travel, and a love for art. Daniel wasn't intimidated by Sophia's strength, nor by the imposing presence of Arthur, who watched their interaction from a distance with a discreet smile. Their dates became more frequent. Daniel was different from Peter. He was self-assured but not arrogant. He admired Sophia's work but didn't idealize her. He saw her as a complete woman, with her qualities and her vulnerabilities. Lucas at first was a bit resistant. He was very attached to his mother and grandfather, and the idea of a new man in their lives made him insecure. But Daniel, with patience and kindness, won the boy over. He took him on outings, played soccer with him, and listened to him attentively. Arthur, ever protective, did his own background check on Daniel. He found that he was a man of integrity, with a solid career and an impeccable reputation. He approved of his daughter's relationship, happy to see her happy again. Sophia allowed herself to love again. Daniel brought lightness and joy to her life, a balance between her intense work and moments of peace. She realized that life was made of cycles, of losses and new beginnings, and that love, when true, always finds a way. There were still challenges ahead, but Sophia was no longer alone. She had Lucas, Arthur, and now Daniel, a new family, built on the foundations of love, respect, and resilience. Do you think Sophia and Daniel's relationship will face any kind of external opposition or challenge, or have most of the conflicts already been overcome? The question of new challenges in Sophia and Daniel's relationship was a pertinent one, as life, as Sophia well knew, rarely offered a path without obstacles. Most of the past conflicts had been overcome, but complete happiness often attracts the envy and meddling of others. Sophia and Daniel's relationship flourished. He was the safe harbor Sophia had been searching for, a partner who supported her in her projects, made her laugh, and loved Lucas as if he were his own son. Arthur's house, already a welcoming home, became even more vibrant with Daniel's presence. Lucas, now 12, had grown attached to Daniel. The architect helped him with his homework, took him to soccer games, and shared his passion for building and design. Daniel's fatherly figure complemented Arthur's loving presence and the respectful relationship Lucas maintained with Peter. Arthur, for his part, was radiant. Seeing his daughter happy and fulfilled was the greatest reward. He and Daniel developed a friendship based on mutual respect and admiration for Sophia. However, Sophia's public life and Arthur's prominence did not go unnoticed. The success of the Beacon project and Sophia's influence on the social scene constantly kept her in the spotlight. And, as in any success story, there were those who watched with envy and resentment. The first sign of a new challenge came from an unexpected source: Daniel's ex-wife. Helena, an elegant and sophisticated woman with a volatile temperament, reappeared in Daniel's life after years of absence. She had never accepted the divorce, and upon learning of Daniel's new relationship with Sophia, she felt threatened. Helena began making calls and sending messages to Daniel, initially with flimsy excuses about pending matters, but quickly escalating to insinuations and veiled threats. She tried to undermine Daniel's confidence, questioning Sophia's motives and implying that she was only interested in Arthur's fortune. Daniel, who knew his ex-wife well, tried to handle the situation with calm and firmness. He made it clear to Helena that his relationship with Sophia was serious and that he would not tolerate any kind of interference. But Helena was not one to give up. She started showing up at public events where Sophia and Daniel were present, creating scenes and trying to embarrass the couple. On one occasion, she approached Sophia directly, in an aggressive tone, accusing her of having stolen her husband. Sophia, who had faced much greater adversities, remained calm. She looked at Helena with serenity and said, "Daniel and I are together because we love each other, Helena. There's nothing you can do to change that." Despite Sophia's firm stance, the situation began to affect Daniel. He felt guilty about Helena's meddling and feared it could harm his relationship with Sophia and Lucas. Arthur, sensing the tension, intervened. He summoned Helena for a private conversation where, with his usual calculated coldness, he made it clear that any attempt to disturb his family's peace would have serious consequences. He presented her with a dossier containing information about her own financial irregularities and threatened to expose her publicly if she did not cease her actions. Helena, confronted with reality and Arthur's threat, backed down. She knew she couldn't compete with the billionaire's power and influence. The calls and appearances stopped, and peace, though still fragile, returned to Sophia and Daniel's life. The experience, though unpleasant, served to strengthen the couple's relationship even more. They had faced a challenge together and emerged from it more united and aware of the importance of protecting their love. Do you think Helena has really given up for good? Or might she just be waiting for the right moment for a new attack? The question of Helena's surrender was crucial because in the world of dramatic sagas, an antagonist rarely exits the stage without a final act. Sophia and Arthur, with the experience of their own battles, knew that the calm could just be the prelude to a new storm. Arthur's threat had silenced Helena, but it hadn't necessarily defeated her. The following months were ones of apparent tranquility. Helena disappeared from the radar, and the lives of Sophia, Daniel, and Lucas continued on their harmonious course. The couple's relationship deepened, and the family they were building was a refuge of love and complicity. Lucas, now 13, was entering his teenage years, and Daniel was a solid and present father figure, guiding him with affection and firmness. The Beacon project continued to grow, and Sophia dedicated herself wholeheartedly to new projects. She was committed to creating a professional training center for the mothers they helped, offering courses and workshops to help them achieve financial independence. Arthur, for his part, had become a full-time grandfather. He spent hours with Lucas, teaching him chess, telling him stories, and sharing his vast life experience. The bond between grandfather and grandson was one of deep admiration and affection. However, the peace was only superficial. Helena, her pride wounded and burning with a desire for revenge, had not given up. She had merely changed her strategy. Instead of direct attacks, she opted for a more subtle and insidious approach, targeting Sophia's most vulnerable point, her reputation and the credibility of the Beacon project. Helena began to approach less scrupulous journalists and bloggers, feeding them distorted information and half-truths about the non-profit. She insinuated that the Beacon project's funds were being used for Sophia's personal purposes, that the projects were ineffective, and that the organization was just a front for money laundering. The stories at first were just whispers in gossip columns, But they quickly gained traction. Malicious articles began to appear on news portals, questioning Sophia's integrity and the effectiveness of the Beacon project. Public opinion, always volatile, began to turn against the non-profit. Donations dwindled, and some key partners started to pull away. Sophia's team, though loyal, felt the weight of the accusations. Years of work, built with so much effort and dedication, seemed to be crumbling. Sophia, who had faced similar attacks in the past, felt the bitterness of injustice. She knew Helena was behind it all, but proving it was another matter. The accusations were vague, based on insinuations and rumors, difficult to refute with concrete facts. Arthur, realizing Helena's new offensive, was furious. He mobilized his lawyers and his communications team to counterattack. But Helena had learned from her mistakes. She operated in the shadows, using intermediaries and anonymous sources, making it difficult to trace her actions. Daniel, seeing Sophia's distress, offered his unconditional support. He helped her organize information, prepare defenses, and stay calm in the midst of the storm. His presence was a balm for Sophia, who found in him the strength to keep fighting. The battle against Helena would not be easy. She was a cunning adversary who knew Daniel's weaknesses and, by extension, Sophia's. But Sophia was not alone. She had Arthur, Daniel, Lucas, and the entire team of the Beacon project by her side. And above all, she had the truth. Do you think the truth will be enough to unmask Helena and restore the reputation of the Beacon project? Or will the battle be more complex than Sophia imagines? The battle against Helena was indeed more complex than Sophia imagined. The truth by itself was not always enough to combat a well-orchestrated lie. The reputation of the Beacon project was at stake, and Sophia needed a strategy that went beyond simply refuting the accusations. Arthur, with his vast experience in image crises, advised Sophia not to react impulsively. The best defense is a good offense, Sophia, but a surgical one. We need to expose the source and their motives, not just deny the slander. Arthur's communications team began to trace the origin of the fake news. It didn't take long for the connection to Helena to be established, albeit indirectly. She was using a network of fake profiles and sensationalist journalists, who in turn were being funded by a group of businessmen with an interest in destabilizing the Beacon project to promote their own agendas. Sophia, Daniel, and Arthur met to devise a plan. The strategy would be twofold. On one hand, strengthen the communication of the Beacon project, showcasing the real impact of its work and the transparency of its accounts. On the other, unmask Helena and her accomplices, revealing their true motives. Sophia decided that the best way to combat the lies was with truth and emotion. She organized a series of video testimonials with the mothers helped by the Beacon project, who told their stories of overcoming adversity and thanked the non-profit for its support. These videos were released on social media and news channels, touching the public's heart and showing the human face of the organization. At the same time, Arthur and his lawyers prepared a lawsuit against Helena and the media outlets that had published the fake news. They gathered irrefutable evidence of manipulation and defamation, including records of payments from Helena to journalists and compromising emails. Lucas, now 14, followed everything with keen interest. He offered to help his mother with the video distribution, using his tech skills to reach a wider audience. His dedication and support were a balm for Sophia, who found in her son the strength to keep fighting. The pressure on Helena began to mount. The journalists who had been paid by her started to be questioned about the ethics of their reporting. Public opinion, moved by the mother's testimonials, began to turn against the attacks on the Beacon project. In a bold move, Sophia gave an exclusive interview to a major television program. She spoke openly about the attacks, about the pain she felt seeing her work slandered, but also about her determination to continue fighting for the women and children who depended on the Beacon project. During the interview, Sophia revealed Helena's identity as the orchestrator of the smear campaign, presenting some of the evidence Arthur had gathered. She also exposed the shady interests of the businessmen behind Helena, showing how they were trying to use charity for their own ends. The revelation caused an uproar. Helena, publicly exposed, tried to defend herself, but her excuses sounded hollow against the evidence presented by Sophia. Helena's credibility was destroyed, and the businessmen involved in the scheme were investigated for fraud and manipulation. Sophia's victory was resounding. The Beacon Project emerged from the crisis even stronger, its reputation restored and public support renewed. Sophia once again proved that the truth, when well defended, always prevails. The battle against Helena had been more than a fight for the reputation of the Beacon Project. It was a fight for integrity, ethics, and justice. And Sophia, with her courage and determination, had emerged victorious. Do you think that after this victory, Sophia will finally find a period of peace and stability in her life? Or will the nature of her influence continue to attract new challenges? The victory over Helena brought a palpable sense of relief. But Sophia, with the wisdom gained from her many battles, knew that peace and stability were transient states, not final destinations. The nature of her influence, now more consolidated than ever, would continue to attract attention, both admiring and covetous. However, the way she would handle these new challenges would be different, marked by enhanced resilience and strategy. The Beacon Project flourished like never before. The media exposure, though painful, ended up catapulting the non-profit to a new level of recognition and support. Donations returned in full force, and new partners came forward, eager to associate their brands with such a noble cause and such an inspiring leader. Sophia, with her team, expanded the programs, reaching an even greater number of women and children across the country. Lucas, now 15, was a bright and engaged teenager. He had become an active advocate for the cause of the Beacon Project, participating in events and using his digital skills to amplify the non-profit's message. His relationship with Daniel was solid, and the figure of Arthur, his grandfather and mentor, remained a fundamental pillar in his life. Arthur, seeing his daughter and grandson so fulfilled, began to plan his retirement. He had built an empire, protected his family, and watched Sophia blossom. It was time to pass the torch and enjoy a well-deserved rest, dedicating more time to his hobbies and family. Sophia's personal life also found a new rhythm. Her relationship with Daniel deepened, and they began to discuss the possibility of moving in together. The idea of building a home with Daniel, where Lucas could grow up in an environment of love and stability, was a dream Sophia cherished. However, life, as always, had its surprises. The new challenge didn't come from an external enemy or corporate intrigue, but from a revelation from the past that promised to shake the family's foundations. One day, Peter, Lucas's biological father, approached Sophia with a look of deep anguish. He had received news that left him in shock. His mother, Beatrice, before she died, had left a secret will with an unexpected clause. Beatrice, in a final act of manipulation and control, had stipulated that a significant portion of her fortune, which had been recovered after the lawsuits, would be left to Lucas, but with one condition: that he be raised under the guardianship of a member of the Sterling family, and that Sophia renounce legal custody of her son. Otherwise, the fortune would be donated to a distant charity, with no benefit to Lucas. The news hit like a bombshell. Sophia was outraged. It was yet another attempt by Beatrice to control them, even from beyond the grave. Peter, for his part, was torn. He didn't want to give up Lucas, but the amount was substantial and could secure his son's future. Arthur, upon learning of the clause, was furious. He knew it was a trap, a way for Beatrice to seek revenge and destabilize Sophia's life. "This is absurd, Sophia. We cannot give in to this blackmail." Sophia, however, felt the weight of the decision. The fortune was considerable and could open many doors for Lucas, guaranteeing him a top-tier education and a future without financial worries. But the idea of giving up custody of her son, even if only formally, was unbearable. Lucas, upon learning of the situation, showed surprising maturity. "Mom, I don't need her money. I need you and Grandpa and Daniel." The decision was difficult, and Sophia knew she would have to face another battle, not just legal but emotional. The clause in Beatrice's will was a cruel reminder that the past, no matter how much you try to bury it, always finds a way to resurface. Do you think Sophia will give in to Beatrice's blackmail to secure Lucas's financial future? Or will she fight to keep custody of her son, even if it means giving up the inheritance? The clause in Beatrice Sterling's will was a final blow, a last attempt at control that reverberated from the grave. The question of Sophia's decision was the heart of the matter, and the answer for those who knew her was almost obvious. Sophia, the woman who had risen from the ashes and built an empire of love and solidarity, would never give in to blackmail, especially when it came to the custody of her son. "There is no amount of money in the world that can buy my peace and my son's security," Sophia declared to Arthur and Daniel with unwavering firmness. "Lucas is not an object to be negotiated. He is my son, and I am his mother. I will not give up custody for any fortune." Arthur, though he had anticipated his daughter's decision, felt immense pride. "That's my Sophia," he said with a smile. "I knew you wouldn't give in. And don't worry about the money, my daughter. Lucas will have everything he needs, and much more, without needing a single cent from that woman." Peter, for his part, was relieved by Sophia's decision. He had felt pressured by the clause, but deep down, he knew Sophia's choice was the most just and correct one. He didn't want Lucas to be raised under the toxic influence of the Sterling family, even if it meant giving up a fortune. Arthur's legal team was mobilized once again. Beatrice's will was contested in court, arguing that the clause was abusive and violated the child's fundamental right to be raised by his mother. The legal battle promised to be long and draining, but Sophia was prepared. News of the secret will and the court battle leaked to the press, creating a new frenzy. The story of Sophia, the woman who had refused to sell her son for a fortune, moved the public. The Beacon Project received a wave of support and solidarity, and Sophia's image as an inspiring mother and leader was further strengthened. Lucas, with his unusual maturity for his age, was a pillar of support for Sophia. "Mum, I don't care about the money. I just want you to be happy and for us to stay together," he said, hugging her. His son's words were a balm to Sophia's soul, reaffirming that she was making the right decision. During the legal proceedings, new revelations about Beatrice came to light. It was discovered that the matriarch had, in her lifetime, tried to manipulate other family members with similar clauses in their wills, using her fortune as a tool of control. Beatrice's already tarnished image was further demoralized. The court, after reviewing all the evidence and hearing the testimonies, ruled in Sophia's favor. The clause in Beatrice's will was declared null and void, and custody of Lucas remained with his mother. The fortune, as stipulated in the will, was donated to a distant charity, but that didn't matter to Sophia. She had won the most important battle, protecting her son and her family. The victory in court brought a new period of peace and celebration. Sophia and Daniel decided to make their union official, and an intimate wedding was planned, with Arthur, Lucas, Peter, and their closest friends in attendance. The ceremony was simple, but filled with emotion. Sophia, dressed in white, walked down the aisle with Lucas by her side, while Arthur, with teary eyes, watched his daughter achieve another of her dreams. Daniel, with a radiant smile, waited for her, ready to start a new chapter in their lives. That day marked not only the union of Sophia and Daniel, but also the celebration of a journey of overcoming, resilience, and unconditional love. Sophia had proven that true wealth is not in material possessions, but in the bonds of affection and the strength of a family built on respect and truth. Do you think Sophia, Daniel, and Lucas's lives will finally find lasting stability, or will new challenges, perhaps of a more personal nature, still await them? The question of lasting stability was the background music of Sophia's life. She had learned that life was a continuous cycle of challenges and triumphs, and that true stability lay in the ability to adapt and grow. Her marriage to Daniel wasn't the end point, but a beautiful new chapter full of promise and inevitably new nuances. The lives of Sophia, Daniel, and Lucas settled into a happy and harmonious routine. The house, once a refuge, became a vibrant home, filled with laughter, conversations, and the aroma of home-cooked meals. Daniel was an exemplary husband and stepfather, and his presence brought a lightness and balance that Sophia didn't know she needed. Lucas, now 16, was a promising young man. He excelled in his studies and in sports, and his passion for technology led him to explore new horizons. His relationship with Peter, His biological father remained cordial and respectful, with regular meetings that reinforced their mutual affection. Peter, for his part, had found peace in his new life in the countryside, dedicating himself to his environmental non-profit and a new relationship. Arthur, the patriarch, watched his family's happiness with a full heart. He had officially retired, but remained active in his investments and philanthropic projects, always with a watchful eye on the well-being of Sophia and Lucas. The Beacon Project continued to thrive under Sophia's leadership. The non-profit had become a national and international benchmark, and Sophia was a respected voice in global forums on female empowerment and human rights. Her story of overcoming inspired millions, and she used her platform to advocate for a more just and equal world. However, life, in its infinite complexity, had a new challenge in store, one of a more personal and intimate nature. Sophia and Daniel, after a few years of marriage, began to feel the desire to have a child together. The idea of expanding their family filled them with joy and anticipation. They tried to conceive naturally for a while, but without success. After medical tests, they discovered that Sophia was facing some difficulties in conceiving again. The news was a blow, but they didn't let it defeat them. They decided to explore other options such as in vitro fertilization. The process was emotionally draining. Hopes and disappointments alternated, testing the couple's resilience. Sophia, who had always been a strong woman, felt vulnerable. Daniel, with his patience and unconditional love, was her safe harbor, her support at every step of the way. Lucas, upon learning of his parents' desire to have a sibling, was enthusiastic. He dreamed of being a big brother and promised to help in any way he could. His maturity and affection were a balm for Sophia and Daniel. Arthur, always present, offered all his financial and emotional support. He researched the best specialists and clinics, ensuring that Sophia had access to the best treatments. After several attempts and many moments of anguish, the long-awaited news finally arrived. Sophia was pregnant. The joy was indescribable. The entire family celebrated the news, and the house was filled with a new energy, with plans and expectations. Sophia's pregnancy was closely monitored, with all the necessary care. She, who had faced so many battles, now dedicated herself to taking care of herself and the new being growing inside her. 9 months later, the family welcomed a beautiful baby girl, whom they named Aurora. Aurora's arrival brought a new dimension of love and happiness to Sophia and Daniel's life. Lucas was a caring and protective big brother, and Arthur, a doting grandfather who never tired of spoiling his granddaughter. Sophia's life, which began with tears and humiliation, had transformed into a tale of resilience, love, and overcoming. She had built her own family, her own legacy, and proven that true strength lies in the ability to love, forgive, and start over. Sophia's story was not about the happy ending, but about the journey, about the constant search for meaning and purpose. And with Aurora in her arms, she knew that the journey was just beginning, full of new adventures and challenges, but always with love as her guide. Do you think Sophia's story, with all its twists and lessons, could inspire other women to find their own strength and build their own paths? The question of Sophia's ability to inspire other women was the very essence of her journey. Her story, with all its twists and lessons, was already, in fact, inspiring millions. The arrival of Aurora was not just a new chapter in her personal life, but a symbol of hope and renewal for all the women who followed her path. Sophia, with Aurora in her arms, felt a completeness that would transcend any challenge. Motherhood, for the second time, connected her to an ancestral strength, a feminine wisdom that pushed her to go further. She had found her purpose not only in the Beacon Project, but in the very experience of being a woman, a mother, a wife, and a leader. The Beacon Project continued to expand, driven by Sophia's energy and vision. The non-profit was no longer just a project. It was a movement. The professional training center she had dreamed of became a reality, training women in various fields and ensuring them a dignified future. Sophia's story was told in lectures, documentaries, and books, becoming a beacon for those seeking a path of overcoming. Lucas, now a young adult, had entered college, majoring in computer engineering. He continued to be Sophia's right-hand man on tech projects for the non-profit, developing apps and platforms that expanded the reach of the Beacon Project. His relationship with Aurora was one of admirable affection and protection, and he was immensely proud of his family. Daniel, her loyal partner, was Sophia's foundation. He balanced her hectic life with the calm and stability that kept her centered. His love was a safe harbor, and his admiration for Sophia was evident in every gesture. Together, they formed a powerful partnership, both in their personal lives and in their social projects. Arthur, the great mentor and protector, enjoyed his retirement with the serenity of one who has fulfilled his mission. He spent his days reading, gardening, and, most importantly, spending time with his grandchildren. Aurora was the light of his eyes, and he delighted in watching her grow, surrounded by so much love. Sophia's story, which began with the humiliation of a divorce at Christmas dinner, had transformed into an epic of resilience. She had proven that pain can be a catalyst for transformation, that adversity can forge strength, and that love, in its many forms, is the greatest wealth. Her journey was not without scars, but each one told a story of overcoming. She had faced cruelty, betrayal, envy, and manipulation, and from each battle she emerged stronger, wiser, and more human. Sophia was no longer the naive young woman who had married Peter. She was a complete woman who had found her voice, her purpose, and her place in the world. Her life was a testament that it is possible to rewrite one's own destiny, to turn pain into power, and to build a legacy of love and hope. The story of Sophia, the woman who turned a bitter divorce into a new beginning, echoed in hearts and minds, inspiring other women not to be silent, not to conform, to seek their own light, even in the darkest of nights. She was living proof that, in the end, love always wins. And so, the narrative of Sophia, with its twists and lessons, concluded, not as a final stop, but as an invitation to reflection, inspiration, and an unwavering belief in the strength of the human spirit. Do you believe that Sophia's story, even with such an inspiring ending, could still have unexpected developments in the distant future, or has her main journey found its conclusion? The question of future developments was the natural echo of a life as rich and full of twists as Sophia's. The main journey had, indeed, found its conclusion in an inspiring ending. But life, in its essence, is a river that never stops flowing. The years passed, and Sophia's family continued to grow and evolve, facing new challenges and celebrating new achievements, always with the wisdom and resilience that Sophia had cultivated. 20 years had passed since Aurora's arrival. Sophia, now a mature and experienced woman in her early 50s, remained at the helm of the Beacon Project, which had become a global organization with offices in several countries and an incalculable impact on the lives of millions of women and their families. Her image was synonymous with hope and transformation, and she was often cited as one of the most influential leaders of her generation. Lucas, in his early 30s, was a successful tech entrepreneur, but never strayed from his roots. He had founded a startup that developed innovative solutions for non-profits, and the Beacon Project was his main partner. He married a brilliant young woman and had 2 children, bringing even more joy to the family. Aurora, the youngest, had grown into a vibrant young woman with a passion for the arts. She was studying film and dreamed of using her art to tell stories of overcoming and inspire social change, following in her mother's footsteps. Her relationship with Lucas was one of deep admiration and complicity. Daniel, the love of her life, continued to be her safe harbor. He had retired from architecture and dedicated his time to social projects and his family. His calm and loving presence was the perfect balance for Sophia's hectic life. Arthur, the patriarch, had passed away peacefully a few years earlier, leaving a legacy of love, wisdom, and generosity. His absence was felt, but his memory lived on in every family member, in every lesson, in every gesture of affection. He had seen his daughter flourish and build an extraordinary life, and that was all he could have wished for. Peter, Lucas's biological father, had also found his own path. He remained dedicated to his environmental non-profit and maintained a friendly relationship with Sophia and Daniel, and a special affection for Lucas and his children. The bitterness of the past had been replaced by a serene acceptance of his role in Lucas's life. Sophia's life was not without new challenges. The global expansion of the Beacon Project brought with it political and cultural complexities, demanding even greater diplomacy and resilience from her. There were moments of fatigue, of doubt, but she always found strength in her family and in the cause she loved so dearly. On a sunny day, Sophia was in her office reviewing reports when Lucas and Aurora walked in, accompanied by her grandchildren. The scene was one of pure joy and love. Sophia looked at each of them, at the life she had built, at the legacy she was leaving. She remembered that Christmas dinner, how everything seemed to have fallen apart. And now there she was, surrounded by love, by purpose, by a family that was her greatest treasure. Sophia's story was not just about surviving, but about thriving, about turning pain into power, adversity into opportunity. Sophia's main journey had indeed found its conclusion in an inspiring ending, but life, in its infinite generosity, continued to offer new chapters, new joys, new lessons. And Sophia, with her heart full of gratitude and her resilient soul, was ready for each one of them. The story of Sophia, the woman who turned a bitter divorce into a new beginning, echoed in hearts and minds, inspiring other women not to be silent, not to conform, to seek their own light even in the darkest of nights. She was living proof that in the end, love always wins. And so the narrative of Sophia, with its twists and lessons, concluded not as a final stop, but as an invitation to reflection, inspiration, and an unwavering belief in the strength of the human spirit. Do you believe that Sophia's story, even with such an inspiring ending, could still have unexpected developments in the distant future? Or has her main journey found its conclusion? The question of unexpected developments in the distant future is the essence of life, which, like a river, never ceases its course. Sophia's main journey, with its narrative arcs of overcoming and triumph, had found a satisfying conclusion. But real life is a continuum, not a final point. And so Sophia's story, though complete in its essence, continued to unfold in new generations, in new challenges, and in legacies that transcended her own existence. Years passed, and Sophia's family continued to flourish. Lucas, with his wife and children, was a pillar of innovation and support for the Beacon Project, ensuring that the organization remained relevant and effective in a constantly changing world. Aurora, with her passion for art, became an acclaimed filmmaker, using her productions to give voice to the marginalized and to inspire social change, always with her mother's guidance and support. Sophia and Daniel, aging with grace and love, enjoyed a full life. They traveled, spent time with their grandchildren, and continued to be mentors for the new generations of leaders at the Beacon Project. The house, which was once the scene of so many tears and victories, was now a sanctuary of memories and a beacon of hope for the future. However, life, in its unpredictability, had one last and unexpected development in store, which was not a threat, but an opportunity to revisit the past in a new light. One day, Sophia received a letter. It was from an international law firm, informing her of an unexpected inheritance. The letter revealed that Beatrice Sterling, in her final years of life, tormented by regrets and loneliness, had made a secret amendment to her will. The new clause stipulated that, upon the death of all her direct heirs, who had already passed away or renounced their inheritance due to the scandals, the remainder of her vast fortune, which had been recovered and managed by a trust fund, would be bequeathed to the Beacon Project. The condition was that the organization continue to be led by Sophia or one of her direct descendants, and that the funds be used exclusively for the empowerment of women and children in vulnerable situations. The news shocked Sophia. The woman who had humiliated her and tried to destroy her was now, posthumously, leaving her fortune to the cause Sophia loved so dearly. It was a paradox, a final act from a complex woman who, perhaps in her final moments, had sought some form of redemption. The decision to accept the inheritance was not easy. Sophia consulted Lucas, Aurora, and Daniel. There was a fear that the money would come with some kind of curse or that it could tarnish the reputation of the Beacon Project. But Lucas, with his pragmatic view, argued, "Mum, this money isn't hers anymore. It's a resource that can be used to do immense good. We can transform her negative legacy into something positive, into an engine for the change you've always dreamed of. Aurora, with her artistic sensibility, added, "It's like rewriting history, Mom, taking something that was used for evil and turning it into a force for good. It's your greatest victory." Sophia, after much reflection, decided to accept the inheritance, but she did so on her own terms. The money would be managed by an independent board with full transparency, and every cent would be directed to projects that promoted the education, health, and autonomy of women and children. Beatrice Sterling's fortune, which was once a symbol of power and corruption, now became an instrument of hope and transformation in Sophia's hands. It was the most unexpected and ironic outcome of her journey, a final testament to Sophia's ability to turn adversity into opportunity, and to rewrite not only her own story, but also the stories of others. Sophia's life, with all its twists and lessons, was not just a story of personal overcoming, but a legacy of lasting impact that would continue to inspire and transform lives for generations. The peace and stability she had so sought were not the absence of challenges, but the wisdom and strength to face them, always with love and purpose. And so the story of Sophia, the woman who turned a bitter divorce into a new beginning, echoed in hearts and minds, inspiring other women not to be silent, not to conform, to seek their own light even in the darkest of nights. She was living proof that, in the end, love always wins. I believe this conclusion offers a satisfying closure to Sophia's main journey, while also suggesting the continuation of her legacy through new generations and the lasting impact of her work. The acceptance of Beatrice Sterling's inheritance, with its conditions and the oversight of an independent board, marked a new and grand chapter in the history of the Beacon Project, and consequently, in Sophia's life. It wasn't just a financial injection, but a powerful symbol of redemption and transformation. The fortune that once represented oppression would now be the tool for the liberation of thousands. Sophia, with her silver hair and a serene glow in her eyes, continued to be the driving force behind the organization. Her wisdom, acquired through decades of struggle and overcoming, was a guide for the new generations of leaders she herself had trained. She spent her days between strategic meetings, visits to field projects, and precious moments with her family. Lucas, now a renowned businessman and family man, took on an even more active role in managing the resources from Beatrice's inheritance. He created an innovation fund within the Beacon Project, investing in cutting-edge technologies to optimize aid distribution, distance learning, and professional training in remote regions. His vision and expertise ensured that his great-grandmother's legacy was transformed into an engine of progress. Aurora, the filmmaker, used part of the resources to create a social content production company, focused on documentaries and campaigns that gave a voice to the women and children helped by the Beacon Project. Her films, filled with emotion and truth, reached millions of people, raising public awareness and attracting new supporters to the cause. Daniel, her eternal companion, remained Sophia's safe harbor. He accompanied her on trips, supported her in her decisions, and reminded her of the importance of slowing down and enjoying life's simple pleasures. Together, they watched their grandchildren grow, witnessing the continuation of a legacy that went far beyond their own lives. Sophia's story, which began with the humiliation of a divorce at Christmas dinner, had transformed into an epic of resilience, love, and overcoming. She had proven that pain can be a catalyst for transformation, that adversity can forge strength, and that love in its many forms is the greatest wealth. Her journey was not without scars, but each one told a story of overcoming. She had faced cruelty, betrayal, envy, and manipulation, and from each battle she emerged stronger, wiser, and more human. Sophia was no longer the naive young woman who had married Peter. She was a complete woman who had found her voice, her purpose, and her place in the world. Her life was a testament that it is possible to rewrite one's own destiny, to turn pain into power, and to build a legacy of love and hope. The story of Sophia, the woman who turned a bitter divorce into a new beginning, echoed in hearts and minds, inspiring other women not to Be silent, not to conform, to seek their own light even in the darkest of nights. She was living proof that, in the end, love always wins. And so, the narrative of Sophia, with its twists and lessons, concluded not as a final stop, but as an invitation to reflection, inspiration, and an unwavering belief in the strength of the human spirit. I believe this conclusion offers a satisfying closure to Sophia's main journey, while also suggesting the continuation of her legacy through new generations and the lasting impact of her work. The years unfolded like the pages of an ancient book, each one adding new layers to the tapestry of Sophia's life. She, now a revered matriarch with completely white hair and a gaze that held the wisdom of a century, watched the world from her porch, nestled in the house that had once been Arthur's, and which now pulsed with the life of her grandchildren and great-grandchildren. The Beacon Project was an empire of compassion, a global beacon that illuminated the darkest corners of the world, and her name was whispered with reverence on every continent. Lucas, a middle-aged man with his grandfather's shrewdness and his mother's passion, led the technological arm of the organization, ensuring that aid reached those most in need with efficiency and innovation. Aurora, the award-winning filmmaker, used her art to amplify the voices of women and children, her works resonating in festivals and movie theaters, touching hearts and minds. Daniel, her eternal love, had passed away a few years earlier, leaving a void that would never be filled, but also a legacy of affection and partnership that sustained her. On an autumn afternoon, as the sun painted the sky in shades of orange and purple, Sophia felt a different kind of tiredness, a lightness that was not of exhaustion but of completion. Her grandchildren and great-grandchildren played in the garden, their laughter echoing like music. Lucas and Aurora, now grown and accomplished, sat beside her, their hands intertwined with hers. "I've lived a full life," Sophia whispered, her voice as soft as a breeze. "Full of challenges, yes, but also of immense love. Remember, my children, that true strength is not in never falling, but in always getting back up. And that love is the greatest revolution." Her eyes, which had witnessed so much pain and so many victories, closed gently. Final feather-light breath escaped her lips, and a serene smile formed on her face. The sun set, and with it, the light of an era faded, but the flame that Sophia had lit in the Beacon Project and in the hearts of her family would burn forever. The news of her passing reverberated around the world. Leaders, activists, mothers, and children from every corner mourned the loss, but also celebrated the extraordinary life of a woman who dared to dream and fight for a better world. The funeral was a tribute to her life, not a lament but a celebration of her legacy. On the epitaph of her simple, elegant headstone it read, "Sophia, she turned pain into power and love into a legacy." The end of the story. And so, we come to the end of Sophia's incredible journey, from that humiliating Christmas dinner where her world fell apart, to becoming a globally respected matriarch and the founder of the Beacon Project. Sophia showed us the true strength of resilience. Remember Peter's betrayal, the shadow of Beatrice, the schemes of Valentine, and the treachery of Helena. Every obstacle was a stepping stone in her ascent, every tear a seed for a future of hope. She taught us that love, family, and integrity are the pillars of a full life. If you were moved, inspired, and connected with Sophia's story, make sure to join our community. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of our engaging narratives. Hit that like button on this video to show us you loved this journey. Comment below what the most powerful moment was for you and what Sophia taught you. And, of course, share this story with friends and family so more people can be inspired. And if you're hungry for more drama and plot twists, don't worry. On the left, you'll find a playlist packed with other incredible stories that will grab your attention from start to finish. Come join us on this storytelling adventure.